We've all been taught that gravity is a force, right? It's one of the most fundamental concepts in science. But what if that idea is wrong? What if gravity isn't actually a force at all? Okay, let's get into it, because we're about to explore a description of reality that challenges pretty much everything we thought we knew.
Right now, the standard picture in physics is that the universe is run by four fundamental forces. You've got the strong and weak nuclear forces working inside atoms, you have electromagnetism, and of course, the big one, gravity. And hey, this model is incredibly good at predicting things, but it does leave us with a kind of fragmented picture. Like we have four different rulebooks for a universe that you'd think should only have one.
And that's where the giant question mark comes in. What if these four forces aren't separate at all? What if they're just different labels we've put on the various expressions of one single underlying process that governs absolutely everything?
To explore that question, we have to look at a framework called the Unified Postmodern Theory, or UPT for short, and it presents a completely different starting point for how to think about the universe.
This theory was developed by Mr. Thanh Hảo, and UPT doesn't try to unify the forces, which is what physicists have been attempting for decades. Instead, it describes how they were never separate to begin with. The description is plain. Reality operates through one and only one single process.
So what is this single process? Well, it starts with a new fundamental building block. UPT describes an absolute fundamental particle called the fountain. And according to this description, everything in the universe is made of these fountains and their intrinsic vacuum. Now, it's really crucial to get this. The vacuum isn't just empty space around the particle. It's an inseparable property of the fountain itself. It's like a personal field that belongs exclusively to it.
This new foundation means we have to let go of some old ideas. At this super fundamental level, UPT describes a reality where there's no action at a distance. There are no pulling or pushing forces, and there's no independent background, no fixed stage for things to happen on. They're only found-ons and their vacuum. That's it.
So if there's no pushing or pulling, what makes anything happen? UPT describes this continuous three-step process. First, a phanon's vacuum changes. It contracts or expands. Second, this causes a shift in intensity, a redistribution, as the vacuum tries to find a balanced, compatible state with its neighbors. And third, that change spreads directly from one phanon's vacuum to the next through direct contact. This single, elegant process is described as the engine of the entire universe.
All right, so let's take this new framework and apply it to the force we know best, gravity. If gravity isn't a pull, then what have you been observing all this time? When we see an apple fall from a tree or planets orbiting the sun, what we're actually seeing are objects moving toward one another. We observe these big macroscopic motions and, based on our models, we give that phenomenon a label, gravity. We're just describing what we see.
But UPT reframes this completely. It states that gravity is not a distinct fundamental force that's pulling on things. Instead, what we call gravity is simply what that single operating process looks like when a specific set of circumstances are met. It's a manifestation on a large scale, not a fundamental mechanism in itself.
So, what are those specific conditions? When does this single process look like gravity to us? UPT describes three things. First, the foundons are in a state of inward accretion, which is a process of gathering. Second, there's a difference in density. And third, the main object, the host, like a planet or a star, is macroscopic. It's huge. The pull that we feel is just the large-scale result of countless foundons all self-adjusting to find a more stable state.
This also changes how we think about attraction and repulsion. According to UPT, these aren't two opposing forces. They're just descriptive labels for the direction of that single adjustment process. When foundons move toward a host to find stability, we call it attraction. When they move away from it to find stability, we call it repulsion. It's the exact same process, just happening in different directions depending on the situation.
So, does this all mean that centuries of physics from Newton and Einstein were just wrong?
Well, UPT's answer to that is a very clear no. The difference is all about the level of description.
To be crystal clear, UPT does not invalidate the work of Newton or Einstein. Their models are incredibly accurate for describing what happens in our macroscopic world. UPT doesn't replace those descriptions. It aims to explain the fundamental mechanism of why they happen, the machinery that's running underneath it all.
Here's the key difference in how they work. Contemporary physics sees something happen, an observable phenomenon, and then it classifies it. It gives it a name, like gravity. UPT, on the other hand, describes the operating mechanism before any of that classification happens. It's focused on the engine itself, not just the different sounds the engine makes.
When you start to see things this way, it has some really profound implications for how we look at science and the nature of the universe itself.
From this perspective, the whole picture of physics changes. The long search for a unified theory becomes, well, unnecessary if the forces were never separate in the first place. Those contradictions we find between theories might just be problems with our labels, not with reality itself. Ultimately, matter, space, waves, and what we call forces are all just different faces of the same exact process, the changing of the fondant vacuum. So it all just boils down to one type of particle, the foundon. One fundamental property, its intrinsic vacuum. And one single continuous process of self-adjustment. The immense complexity that we see all around us emerges from this really simple foundation.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. UPT doesn't make the universe more complex. It does the exact opposite. It reveals that reality is fundamentally, profoundly simpler than the fragmented, multi-force picture we've traditionally used to describe it. The complexity comes from our labels, not from the universe itself.
And that leaves us with a final thought. Maybe we've been thinking about it all backwards. Maybe the universe isn't a collection of objects that follow a set of external rules or forces. Maybe, as UPT describes, reality isn't governed by a process. Reality is the process.